Hi everybody, let's talk about bowing today. Bowing is so important on the viola. There's so many things to think about, but let's reduce it to a few things that are really important. The first is the cross. The cross is this. What do I mean by that? Well, the only thing that really makes your sound with the bow is the contact between the bow and the string right here. And that forms a cross right there. So you can see it looks just like that. Now, we can have a cross that's far from the bridge, close from the bridge, in the middle. We can do all sorts of things, but that's what really matters. So, our focal point when we're playing always needs to be on the contact with the instrument. So when we're using our bow, it's where the bow contacts the instrument. On our left hand in our vibrato, it's where the finger touches the string. Everything we do in the vibrato, whether you use an arm vibrato or a wrist vibrato, it really doesn't matter. What really matters is what's happening on the string. So we have this point of contact over here and this point of contact. So when the bow touches the string, magical things can happen. And that's wonderful. So let's talk about 3 things that make our sound. The first is the bow speed. When we move the bow quicker, we get a different sound than when we move the bow slower. Of course, there are many variations. We'll get to that in a second. But we have a fast bow. Like so. A fast bow, in my mind, makes the string spin more, which can make your vibration of the string go faster, and that can project your sound a whole bunch. So that can be used very well. When we slow the bow down, we can sometimes get the bow to sink more into the string. Because if you think of like a car driving, when the car goes really fast, the tires never really grip the ground. But when it goes really slowly, the tires have the car sinking more into the ground. So it's kind of the same thing. So when we move the bow slower, the bow can just sink into the string. Like so. So sometimes we can get more depth of sound when our bow is going slower than when it's going quicker. Is that true all the time? Well, nothing is true all the time. But just as a good way to think, when the bow moves fast, we're going to spin the sound a little bit more. When we move the bow slower, we're going to sink the sound a little bit more. Which brings us to the next thing, and that is the bow pressure. The contact of the bow on the string and the pressure, the weight we put into it. Some people use the word weight, some people use the word pressure. It's really the same thing. How many pounds are on that string? So if we have a very light pressure on the string, we tend to get kind of a more transparent type of a sound. So the string is kind of blowing across the string, not far away from sounding like a flute over there. But if we add a lot of pressure to the string, we get a thicker sound, maybe not as transparent, can be almost pasty. The pasty, opaque type of a sound. Now, which one's better? You can't say because it depends what you're playing and what you want. And we have to realize there's an infinite number of variations between the lightest bow stroke and the heaviest bow stroke. We have medium. can vary it even by note. And that variety is what makes us able to sing so beautifully on the instrument. So we've talked about two things so far in our trio of bowing things. And the first one is the speed of the bow, and the second is the weight of the bow or the pressure of the bow on the string. I use those words interchangeably. So we can have a slow bow or we can have a fast bow. We can have a heavy bow or we can have a very light bow. And which one's better? Again, we can't say. But now we have variations. It becomes infinite because we have variations of how much pressure we use, but we also have variations on how much speed we use. So we can have a fast bow with a lot of pressure, a slow bow with a lot of pressure, like so. So you can see already that's how we as viola players and string players can make color. Now there's one other thing that we can talk about that is equally important to the bow pressure and the bow speed, and that is the contact point or the sounding point. Now, what is the contact point or the sounding point? Well, it's very simple. We have a bridge here. We have the end of the fingerboard over here. And so we have about 2.5 inches there of bowing room. So the contact point is where the bow touches the string between the bridge and the fingerboard. So we can have a very bridgy type of a contact point, or we can have a fingerboardy, or anything in between. And these all add up in our equation to our sound. So basically, we have bow speed plus bow pressure plus the contact point equals our sound or color that we're making at the time. And there are so many variations, and it depends on who is the composer. What kind of music is this? Is it a slow piece? Is it a fast piece? What do I want to sound like? Is the composer from France, Germany, America, Russia? All those things come into play when we decide what kind of color that we want. For instance, when I play something by Bach, I tend to have a contact point that's a little bit farther from the bridge to kind of get that airy, open sound, to feel that I'm inside a cathedral playing beautiful Bach music. I also will use a bit of a faster bow speed to spin the sound and get more projection. And how much pressure do I use? I probably will lighten the pressure a little bit to emulate using a Baroque bow. So I get something like this. So that's one way to think. If I'm playing something French, I want to have a lot of speed of bow, very light bow. And I want a contact point kind of in the middle-ish to the fingerboard-ish. But if I'm playing something a little bit more Germanic, I'm going to want to have maybe a slower bow with a little bit more bow pressure to kind of add some heft to my sound. Like so. So basically, that sums it up. When we're playing pieces, we need to always think of that magical 3 things in our equation. And our equation, again, is bow speed plus bow pressure plus the sounding or contact point of the bow equals the sound or the color that we're making. That is so important. Well, I hope that makes a lot of sense. Really, what you need to do, you can discuss this with a teacher, you can experiment, you can do both, and then we get on with our playing. The more variety that we have in these things, the better we're going to play. And until I see you the next time, happy practicing.